Welcome to Builder's Journey on the Club Pod. I'm Nicole, your host and co-creator at Seed Club. Builder's Journey brings to life the learnings from Seed Club's alumni projects, from Genesis story to forming your team to preparing for launch. In this episode, I spoke with Bas Grasmeyer and Jeremy Grinberg from the COLORS DAO founding team. COLORS is a global community of creatives supporting each other across disciplines. Building off of COLORS Studio, the global music talent showcase and discovery community. Bas and Jeremy discussed the importance of building cadence, basic structure, and predictability in a community, and how that allows people to build cultural Legos, plus the process of evolving a DAO out of an existing organization, and navigating the various organizational and token structures that best meet the needs of the community. Welcome to Builder's Journey. I'm very excited to speak to you both. I've had the pleasure of getting to meet Jeremy in person recently at NFT NYC. Bas, someday we will meet in person. It's going to be really exciting because I've known you for longer, actually. Before we get into the stories of COLORS and all of your learnings, would you be willing to introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about your role at COLORS?
My name is Jeremy, and I'm one of the community leads at the COLORS Community DAO, which is a DAO that has sprung out of COLORS Studios, which is a music curation platform. I'll let Bas introduce himself, but he's also a community lead along with me.
Yeah, my name is Bas, based in Berlin. Maybe a decade of history working in music and specifically digital topics in music. Originally, I was very interested in community strategy, but then rolled into product development. Also write a lot, contribute to Water and Music, which is another Seed Club alumnus. Write for my own newsletter. And with all these interests, I got involved with COLORS about 1.5 years ago when they started thinking about we want to build something to integrate ourselves more with our community and vice versa, integrate our community more into what COLORS is. So that's how that kind of journey started for me.
Bas, you and I have kicked around the Water and Music Discord for a while, which is where we met. Jeremy, I'm curious, where was your first introduction into Web3?
Yeah, so I've been working in the music industry in artist management, A&R, and creative direction since 2015. When the pandemic hit, I was sort of trying to figure out what to do in the music space because touring wasn't a thing, and it sort of seemed like you'd release a song and hopefully people listen to it, but there was really no way to gain any momentum. And I started seeing just the energy on Twitter and started these new communities emerging. I think that maybe somewhat aligned with the bull market and the fact that just everyone was inside. But I had an experience. I managed an artist named Luna, and she played the Metaverse Festival for Decentraland. And I was walking around sort of selling these wearable headphones in this Metaverse Festival in my pajamas, seeing how many avatars just appeared, and you collected a POAP and there were 800 people as avatars watching her performance. And I just remember being this is really fun and really different, and it kind of felt like I was actually at a real festival.
Yeah, Aluna at the Refraction event at NFT NYC was maybe my favorite musical experience. Definitely while I was there, and just amazing performance. So cool, and so cool that she was a part of your intro into Web3. I love that. Bas, you have been in this space for a bit longer. I'm curious, maybe you can share a few parts of your journey within Web3, and then I'm also curious how you two ended up connecting.
I guess I got somewhat involved pre-Web3, back when in music maybe things were just called blockchain. I was in a 1-week kind of think tank workshop at Music Tech Fest in Berlin, which probably was 2016 or so. It was basically Ethereum's first year. There was a really smart team there that was part of the work group. There was this one group that was building very actively. They were not just thinking about blockchain, they were very actively building. They were called Jack, JAAK, really kind of important early kind of music blockchain startup. They told people we're going to go to like this Ethereum meetup. And I think at that point, nobody had really heard of Ethereum, at least none of like the music business people. So we went to, I think it was like Ethereum's official like development office here in Berlin. And it was like a meetup there and people were presenting their projects and things like that. So this was like really early and people were already kind of in that room. Well, some of the things being presented were like highly technical and I had no idea what was going on. But there were also kind of early ideas about kind of rights management or even maybe some of the narratives that you hear around NFTs where this can like radically change IP and stuff like that. But this was like way pre-NFT. This was like early Ethereum. And these builders, they were speculating on how it's going to change industries. Actually being in one of those industries that might be affected is like, that's definitely not how it's going to work. But regardless, like none of this is going to work this way, but regardless, they're going to change the world. And then I kind of kicked myself for like just walking out of that room and not really coming back into it, except for like the occasional kind of music blockchain panels and discussions around like how can blockchain perhaps solve things like rights management and royalty payments and stuff like that. Fast forward to Web3, I think my entrance, I don't know if it was that much earlier than Jeremy or maybe even around the same time, but I think it was through Songcamp. That community kind of motivated me to like, all right, let's like set myself up properly, set up the ENS.
And so where did you two meet? Had you met prior to being in quote unquote Web3 and kicking around digitally? And where did sort of this team and the impetus first come from?
First and foremost, I'd been reading actually Bas's newsletter for Music X, so I was a stan.
Same.
But I got in touch with Colors through one of the CEOs, and we'd been friendly just from the music industry. And as I started kind of diving into Web3 more, I had a discussion, and Bas had sort of told Colors, "Hey, by the way, Web3 is a great way to like bring our community closer than ever before." And so it sort of just aligned like that. And then, he introduced me to Bas, and it was cool because me and Bas are definitely very different in how we approach things. So it actually worked really well. It wasn't like, oh, we do exactly the same thing.
Yeah, which is the key. I mean, that's typically as far as values and vision, you want alignment, but then as far as skills and execution, you definitely want that Venn diagram to more or less be two circles as often as possible in a team, because then you complement each other. Let's talk a little bit about Colors. You spoke briefly about how Colors has existed prior to Web3. And so I would love, Jeremy, if you can share a short description of what Colors is. And then beyond that, what did the transition and the exploration and ultimately the decision to pursue a Web3 model look like?
Yeah. So Colors is really a music discovery and curation platform, most known for its YouTube flagship artist shows, which featured artists from all different parts of the world. And the YouTube has over 6 million subscribers, over 2 billion views in all the videos. And we've discovered and helped shine a light on artists such as Billie Eilish and Georgia Smith really early in their careers. And the show really sort of acts as a moment that's quite a big moment in an artist's career. If they're on stage, it opens a lot of doors for them. Yeah, so because of these artist shows, and we've had over 600 of them, we've developed a very large community. But it's really hard to like engage with that community more deeply when it's that big. And I'll let Bas kind of touch on how we kind of got to Web3 from there.
Exactly as you said, with size of community. So there was always the sentiment, like this is kind of a community thing. If your community grows, but you kind of keep doing everything with a group of a size that doesn't scale with the community, it becomes less a community and more of an audience. So prior to me joining, actually, they were already kind of like figuring out like strategies and what is like meaningful and impactful to do in the world with this like platform that Colors has now. So it was a social responsibility research or survey that looks into basically young creatives in certain key cities all around the world, and kind of to understand what do these people need, what do they want more of as creatives. And there were certain themes to that occurs basically all around the world, which is basically three things like network, funding, even just a little bit, and like a safe space for like expression where you can find, some people would say like-minded people, and we could talk about that words, maybe not on Builder's Journey, but in a different podcast. But like, I don't know if a community should necessarily be like very like-minded. I don't think that's the most important criteria if you're building a diverse and globally representative community, or if that's your intention. At least a community where you can feel safe to express yourself. So as we kind of went on a journey to understand how do we bring Colors' community in to what Colors is doing and vice versa, this was also one of the things that we were exploring. I would argue that the decision to use Web3 kind of predates even Colors' awareness of Web3. One of the things I heard early on, like one of the concerns in the team was like, if we invite outside people to collaborate, how do we make it fair for them? How do we make it something that's not like extractive, which is platforms, they tend to aggregate all the value and then most of it stays with the platform. This was like an early problem that we were thinking about. How do we set this up so that the community can benefit from what it is doing and what it is building in kind of equal parts as Colors, or maybe even more so? And then kind of fast forward late summer, there have been like a lot of useful creative experiments in Web3 and communities starting, things like social DAOs like FWB, or I think Bankless is an interesting example where we've also been in touch with some people from like Bankless DAO. One person in Bankless DAO is a contributor with us also, but they have like an interesting model specifically for like, how do you set up a DAO next to like another brand, as well as like Songcamp. I have to keep shouting them out, but they do like amazing work in like experimenting with, can we redefine musical expression on the internet, and which is just the default medium for everyone. So just musical expression periods, basically. And all of these things kind of helped us to start formulating and articulating vision and intention to like, let's do Web3. But in short, Web3, despite it being like hard to onboard people to, is the easiest way by far to set up a community that can capture the value that is generating itself. There's no easier way. It's by far the easiest way.
It sounds like in some ways Colors was a Web3 project. Web3 sort of found it. And I think that for a lot of the communities that most make sense to explore these technologies, they're often operating already in this way. And then the technology is an overlay that sort of allows the behaviors to be more easily coordinated. But, you know, it sounds like the ethos of Colors was very much aligned with how technology is now sort of unlocking these human behaviors and coordination. Jeremy, can you actually maybe share a little bit? I'm curious, because I know we had some conversations early on as you were coming into Seed Club. What were some of the actual tactical considerations and conversations around bringing this existing brand over into Web3? And can you talk a little bit about both what some of the challenges or concerns were, and then also ultimately, how did you resolve those?
I don't know if we've fully resolved all of them. I think we still like deal with the challenges today. When you're building a community that the people that join right away are Web3 native and might actually want to like decentralize right away, versus the fact that we have like this awesome global artist network that we want to sort of teach and explain to them what Web3 is. It's interesting to balance both of these things. It's obviously very valuable for both sides, for the DAO and for Colors, for different reasons. But we kind of have to like toe this line where it's like, we got to really progressively decentralize when it's the Colors DAO. There's a lot of, debate like internally on that and like what the best protocols are for doing that. And also like how to onboard just like the Colors team that's maybe not overly interested in Web3, and trying to teach them. There's so much out there online that just confuses people about like what Web3 really is. But when you really get to the core of like this shared ownership and like capturing community value in a way that's never been possible, I think that's like when things start to unlock and it's like, oh yeah, like it doesn't exist. And like now it does. And so you can kind of always find, and that's, I would say like, if you're talking about the different roles that like Bas and I play, I would say mine is really like trying to explain these principles to people in like the most basic terms and interface with artists and try to make it like less daunting.
I think this also has made us realize how important kind of like building narrative and storytelling is, and explaining how things work. For example, right now, even like artists in like our network who see things happening in Web3, we were setting up like all the Color Show alumni with their own founding passes, their membership NFT basically, so they can like start to participate. When will they care? I think they will care once they see like, okay, well, we did a partnership that brought some funds into this organization, and the community created a proposal to do X that resulted in grants, and that ended up launching these like large creative projects. And I think if you do that and you're not working on the storytelling, you're not gonna onboard people. In our case, it's really important to show how does this work, because it's so refreshing for people to see like, hey, this is like a community building and deciding those things together.
The showing versus telling is, I think, so powerful, which is, I mean, that's one of the reasons why we're here, because it's similar for us in that sharing your stories is often the best way for us to explain the power of what we do at Seed Club. So feel that very deeply. Were there, especially because this was an existing entity outside of Web3, were there legal or other, more traditional structure questions that you had to address? And are there any pieces or learnings there that would be shareable?
We need to create like a legal entity specifically for what eventually will be like kind of proper DAO. One of the reasons for doing that is so that Colors, with all of its operations, is not like liable, because right now one could very easily argue, since like kind of the team that is actively working on this is receiving like funding directly from like Colors. Colors is responsible for everything that the DAO does. And this is like I have to say that it kind of puts the brakes a little bit on like how fast you can decentralize, so to speak. But it's one of many factors. There's a lot of reasons to like take decentralization at a intentional pace. The other thing that we're going to have to figure out, and this is going to be really fun to explore with the community, essentially is what is the framework for which we as a community will use the Colors brand, and how do we like manage that relation? I think this will be a very interesting coordination game. That's going to depend a lot on how do we collaborate, how do we partner with what is currently referred to as like Colors, but to not make everything depend on that one relation with a centralized entity. It also then implies that we have to start doing all these other things that are completely community run and things like that. So like kind of these like legal and even like maybe intellectual property type things very much like inform the strategy, because they become obstacles or barriers, but rather you could also look at them as like components of the strategy to kind of frame it more positively. It's just how it is. That's what this particular challenge is. It's a really interesting challenge to solve, because I think there's going to be loads of organizations doing exactly what we're doing. If we do it right, if we do it wrong, then they shouldn't do what we're doing. I wouldn't be here if I felt that we're doing it wrong.
I have a lot of trust in you both. And yeah, I think the intentional pace is such a crucial aspect, and asking questions and being thoughtful. I think having the right rhythm as you move toward decentralization is the way to go. Let's shift a little bit, because you were talking about coordination games, and you can't talk coordination without talking about some of the various token models that help that along. And so can you talk a little bit about right now what type of token you have out in the world, and share a little bit about also how you came to that model? Jeremy, if you want to maybe kick it off.
Yeah. So we have a NFT membership token, and we have 1,000 of them that are up for sale, and then 700 are allocated towards the existing Colors alumni network and the Colors team. However, if the artist passes are not claimed, then we'll burn them after a year. But we decided to go with an NFT versus a fungible token for a few reasons. One, after our Seed Club experience, I think like one of the main takeaways was that if you start with a token, there's so many things you have to consider with like regulatory issues and tax implications and like securities and just like all this stuff. And it's just like, that's not at least my background, and to like confuse. Yeah, you just like, I don't think we were really necessarily prepared for that. And it just felt like one of the cool things with an NFT, and especially one that we didn't tier, that was just like one NFT, you get the membership. There's no levels of, membership tiers, that everyone's on the same plane, in the same playing field. And I think short term, maybe that's like quote unquote the wrong move for monetary reasons. But I think like long term, and as we thought about it, it just made more sense. Then you only have to cater to like one tier. You don't always have to think what's gold's gonna get versus the silver tier. It just creates all of that we didn't want to deal with. That's basically how we arrived at NFTs and like specifically like a membership NFT.
And Bas, we had some early conversations about how this would play out. So yeah, I think Jeremy definitely +1 on the, one tier. I think the considerations that you're talking about remind me of some of the challenges that artists, for example, have named when they have all of these different tiers within Patreon or something like that. And you've got, 5 different tiers, and you're spending so much time thinking about all of the content you have to create to satisfy these different categories. But beyond just the one tier, Bas, I'm curious where you landed as far as even how the NFT would signal and stand for membership within the organization, and how that would work also for the greater community. Because I know that you both thought really intentionally about how the token would work in the greater sort of sense of belonging and empowerment within the community.
I think like the cool thing about NFTs, they're a really nice framework for creativity. With like a single NFT, you can do so much, and it doesn't immediately start to look like an economics lesson. Because with tokens, like with fungible tokens, people have to calculate to enjoy the art. They have to be like, oh, I have to have this many tokens, and all these things. You can do like really creative things with it too, but like it's kind of different. Not to knock tokens, I think there's like many really great scenarios for them. So for us, we decided, let's make this NFT. Let's call it what it is. We are about to kind of start our real journey here as a community to start DAOing. So we're going to name this thing our Founding Pass NFT, which makes everyone who either is eligible to claim one, certain core contributors, Colors team members, Colors show alumni, or any of the people who want to purchase one. It's like you are here at the start of this journey. You're a founding member of this organization, essentially. To make the pass, we actually collaborated with 2 of the founders of Colors. They like worked on the artwork.
Oh, that's so cool.
For me, that was great because our concept for it was when we are in positions where we have to talk about ourselves, we should try to make those things into either a canvas or a stage so that we can always uplift creativity. So if we're going to drop this like NFT and we're going to get people paying for this, we're going to have like real estate in people's wallets. So it's like, we're going to use that real estate and we're going to put art on there. So the idea was for the pass always to, even before we called it Founding Pass, was like this pass is going to feature artists that we're going to curate with the community. We didn't really have a model for it that was like the same all along, but like where it went was we have this pass. If you own it, you'll be able to mint seasonal art by artists that we're going to be picking together with the community. That's like an exclusive perk, but that art will also be featured. So like we'll have like rotating art on the Founding Pass NFT. If you like what you see, you can go like mint it. If you don't like it, next season it's going to be different. And then seasons being roughly 3-month periods, kind of similar to how some other organizations create kind of these temporal frameworks for like experimentation and trying out different structures and workflows and things like that.
That's so fun. And yeah, I know we pushed around a bunch of different ideas, and I know that there's a lot more sort of on the cutting room floor that you might be picking from and revisiting in the future. I mean, there's so many great concepts out there as far as what that's going to look like as the COLORS DAO grows. COLORS was amongst many of the projects that, had been working very hard for some time, whose launch ultimately coincided with some interesting market moments. None of us was necessarily expecting that, but there was obviously a lot of different factors that contributed to a pretty sudden market downturn. And so I'd love to share 2 stories. I know that like there's probably a lot of learnings that came out of that experience, and some of them, things far beyond our control. Having said that, yeah, I'd love to have you share a little bit about both the pre-work and how you prepared for your token going live, and then as it was going out into the world, any of the learnings that you had in that time and that you're continuing to sort of take from that experience.
I mean, the space moves so quickly. So like the market sentiment and everything can change from one week to another. Nobody knows what's going to happen. Anyone who tells you they do is lying to you. And it's just one of those things where at a certain point you can ask for opinions and plan for different things. But you're really just going to have to take a chance and decide on one sort of vision, if it's one tier pass, this certain price, and then build it and just get it out there and just use it as a launch pad. I think like at a certain point, it was maybe taking us a little bit longer to get this out because we were a little bit precious with it. It was like, it needs to be perfect. It needs to be this, it needs to be that. And we just realized this space really, I don't know if it allows for perfection, because by the time you think you've done something, someone else, it's just so fast, you know? So we just got it out there. Of course, by the time we were ready to go, the market had kind of turned around and it was like, oh, interesting. Okay, where we thought we were going to be is not necessarily where we are right now. But I think what the cool thing is in this time is like everyone's on the same page, right? Everyone's like, I know, right? Yeah, like everyone's dealing with it, so you
Yeah.
don't feel alone. You feel like there's almost like a closeness, and it kind of, the people that are part of our community are like, I think, just a great group of people, and there's really no, at least obvious, like speculation happening. It's the people that are here, like really here, and like people we can actually build with, sort of like what the intention of the founding past was kind of there for anyways. So in a way, it's kind of worked out better for us, but it's presented other challenges that we're like working on right now.
Just to add on to that specific thing, I think like the DAO to DAO relation that we have, like relation to other builders in the space, is even more important. And it's actually really nice because like it just feels like everyone's figuring out like how to build stuff together, and whether it is, can we shine a spotlight on each other or bigger stuff, that's just really great. I think in like a eventual bull market, a moment where like the adoption of these things accelerates, where things move out of subculture to like mainstream culture, what happens then is like crowds will form around like all these institutions, DAOs, communities, and things like that, to the point where you cannot like reach each other anymore. You know they're there because there's like a crowd around them too. You can't as easily like interact. And that's also like a time where you should probably prioritize like, okay, let's focus on my own audience, or my own community is growing, so we build this thing that we're absolutely unique in this time when like things just kind of like shrink a little bit or don't grow as fast. It's really good to just build out all these relations and this kind of like hidden social infrastructure that like underpins all of this. Just to make the visual metaphor complete, just look at a band that goes into the audience after performing. They cannot interact with each other because they're going to be just swarmed by fans if they make good music. We hope to make some great music with other DAOs, metaphorically, maybe even actually.
I love that. All right. Well, I have maybe one final question as we wrap up. And, I referenced a little bit the cutting room floor and that there's a lot of great models out there we explored and that haven't necessarily been implemented yet. I'm curious how you're thinking about that with your community. So, Jeremy, you mentioned that the people that are in the community are just awesome. On top of that, you're going through this decentralization process slowly. What are some of the ideas or next steps that you're thinking about? What does that look like in the community? What are some of the things that are happening in the community? What is it like to be in the community right now?
Yeah, I think we're still building things out and kind of allowing for like emergence within our community to see what people really want to work on. But, we also have a few items that we're going to be working on, such as like an NFT gallery, our version of like an NFT marketplace. To us, that's important because we are at our core like a curation platform, and we want a place that, especially if artists is maybe their first like NFT, regardless if it's a music NFT or just an NFT in general, to have a place that we can just kind of curate a little bit more, just kind of let them know like this is the way it's going to be, and really kind of break it down for them and give them like a nice place to release artwork. So that's something we're working on. Another thing we're working on is a community directory. When you join a DAO, it's hard to know who's actually in it and how you can connect with people, because you might not actually want to be on Discord all day, especially our community. There's a ton of people that have never been on Discord before and may never go on. So we're trying to find ways so that people can easily connect to each other. And we're realizing that the tools don't necessarily exist to like connect a wallet to an email address, to a Twitter, to everything, because, people will try to maintain their sort of privacy and their security, and there's all this kind of stuff. But there are some communities like ours where like that's important because that's what people understand. And so as we're like working our way to like decentralization and all these sort of things, we need these tools to like bring people together and give people other like distribution channels so they understand like what's going on. I'll let Bas touch on some of like more like things that are like happening right now as well.
Yeah, before I say things about the community gallery, also like we're a community that's starting to DAO. So we're currently talking about how do we set up proposal flows? What do they mean for a community that does not have the treasury that it hopes to have? Mm-hmm. And what are the implications for our activities as a community around that? Like, how do we change that and affect that? And probably people will not care that much about governance if there's nothing to really govern in terms of like funds and things like that. Mm-hmm. But like these are all kind of really interesting challenges that we're now starting to figure out. But then in terms of things that you can see, maybe even a little bit from the outside. So on our Discord, as soon as our Discord went premium, when you have like a premium Discord, you have this little like banner at the top where you can like put your logo or something like that. I tried to like source an image there or get like someone inspired from like Colors team to do that, but none of them were really that familiar with Discord. So it's like, you know what? I think we should use this as a gallery. We put art there. So back then the community team was really small. It was myself and Marie, who's kind of designer who works with us. We started to just, whenever there were like visual artists coming into our kind of community pipeline, we just asked them like, hey, can we feature your art? And we would cycle different art through there every 2 weeks. Then at some point, we gave that process over to the communities. Now we have like a team in the community, like a small work group that's watching kind of the visual artists in our community and highlighting them every 2 weeks. And the nice thing about this is there's like a very clear cadence around it, very clear process, a nice framework for people to actually like kind of do the work, and they do it super well. But then that also allows other aspects of the community to start building around that. So there's a regular call on Thursdays hosted by one of our community members, one of key contributors, who created a community highlights call to put like spotlights on like specific community members. And he's practically always making sure that every community gallery feature makes it into that call and that session. Now we're starting to develop editorial around this. So like the notes from these calls can turn into like editorial that we can email to everyone and post on Mirror. And then that's something, kind of the playbook is typically we build something or we make something, we run a pilot, and then we hand it over to community. I think this is something that works quite well. Like I also have like this background writing. So in the case of community editorials, like, okay, I'm just going to write like a weekly roll-up of like what's happening in the community. And then eventually this is going to be like completely community run. The nice thing about this cadence and predictability is that you start seeing all these elements come together and they become like a larger format and like a decentralized community collaboration where everyone does their parts independently, in some cases in actual work groups, so very dependent on each other, but in some cases completely other areas of the community start picking stuff up. And I think this is kind of pointing towards what does the future of these types of media and entertainment organizations look like, and potentially what's the future of something like what would Colors look like if it were launched now. And then we were talking earlier about like building our own NFT gallery, NFT marketplace. So I already know somehow this like community gallery process is going to play into that. I don't know exactly how. We're going to have to figure it out with community. That's going to have to like emerge. But for sure, this is a very important learning that we can take that will play into that. And we can think of processes that like involve a larger part of the community. I do think with curation, it probably always makes sense to have like a smaller group at the end to make certain curatorial decisions, because otherwise it's just a popularity contest. Like then you just get charts, like community charts, which is also something valuable, but it's less exciting perhaps than real curation. But this is something I cannot say. This is also something that we have to discuss with like wider community, have to identify models for, do experiments season after season. This is like one element that I'm very excited about because it's very clear how things emerge around it just because of cadence, basic structure, basic framework, predictability, and that allows other people to like build cultural Legos inside a community, basically.
Yeah, first of all, Bas, I feel like you're inside my head because this is very, very current right now within Seed Club as we think about opening applications for SCO5 and how we're going to engage our community in the curatorial process. So yeah, I felt like you were inside my psyche just then. You know, I think that the last piece, and this is maybe a great place to end our conversation, is around this tension between consistency and structure and then freedom and emergence. And I think you named something really important, which is that having that structure and having that consistency then allows the community to really flourish and develop and lead within those places. And then eventually, they grow out of those structures and start creating new ones. So I'm very excited to see where the colors community is going to go. You all are certainly tackling big questions, and because of that, are leaders in the space. So thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing out your thinking and your learning. Before we tie things up, I would love for you both to just share a little bit about where we can find you and keep up to date with what you're building and doing and what Colors is doing.
Yeah, so find the Colors community on Twitter. It's at ColorsDAO. So check us out there. We post all of our updates there. You can also find a link to our Discord, which is on our website, which you can find in the bio of the Colors DAO Twitter. I just kind of want to direct everyone to that Twitter, actually. It's more exciting than mine. So yeah, that's what I would say. Go there for all the fun things.
Excellent. Well, thank you both. It was such a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us.